This special meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting will be held on Tuesday, February 11th in the board meeting room. This is a public hearing. You do need to sign in up front. We will call you out, so we'll intermittently take breaks. If anyone hasn't signed in, please feel free to come up and sign in. With that, bless you. We have Julie Best and Sarah Parent from CDSP. If you have copies of your speech, that's helpful to the board. If you don't, if you could email me any comments, I will distribute to the board. I'm through.
Good evening. I am Sarah Parent, one of the co-chairs of the Council of Darien School Parents. I live at 227 Hollow Tree Ridge Road, and I have two daughters, one at Middlesex and one at Holmes.
I'm Julie Best, the other co-chair of CDSP. I live at 38 Red Rose Circle. I have three daughters, one at the high school, one at Middlesex, and one at Tokenique. We appreciate Dr. Adley's collaborative approach and his willingness and desire to listen to all constituents. We commend the administration for their careful evaluation of each RC to ensure the needs of the students and staff are met. We recognize the challenges affecting this year's budget and know there's little actual flexibility in the operating budget due to significantly increased fixed costs. We applaud the continued support of some of our newer initiatives, further investment in the rollout of the new math curriculum, the funds to provide next year's ninth graders with iPads for the one-to-one tech initiative, and the continued investment in professional development. We take objection to deferring costs that will inevitably come back next year. We can expect the 21-22 operating budget will have similar constraints as this budget, whether it is purchasing uniform replacements or investing in the next phase of Project Lead the Way. If it should happen this year, and will definitely need to happen next year, it should be in this year's budget.
CDSP continues to advocate for the safety of our students. There are two items directly related to safety in this budget: the replacement of wrestling mats and additional coaching staff. If the wrestling mats are indeed unsafe, they should be replaced. If the coaches are required to ensure safety, then we support adding the coaches. We look forward to hearing additional information about this. While not in the recommended budget, the request from some members of our community for additional buses stems from safety concerns. We look forward to the police department's assessment of pedestrian safety and the conversations that will follow. We do not support directing resources toward OpenGov. The administration has said it is not convinced it is right for the district, and we can find only 3 school districts in the country that use it. The current budget eliminates 7.89 FTEs and includes other difficult, potentially compromising decisions on educational initiatives. Spending $60,000 to $130,000 on software that does nothing to support educational programs or the people who provide them seems irresponsible. We suggest it is time to have an open conversation with other town bodies to discover what questions truly need to be answered. If they involve better tracking and data, perhaps we consider providing supports from Mr. Rudel's office, as he recently described. We are thrilled to stand here tonight and thank you for taking steps towards an action plan for the removal of portables. And we are excited about the idea of revamping our libraries at the same time. Expect to see us in the front row when those architects report out on the findings. Along those same lines, we eagerly await the output from the Strategic Planning Initiative. We suspect there are exciting proposals on the horizon once Dr. Adley has fully acquainted himself with Darien. We would like to thank all of the CDSP members for their time, energy, and passion. You will hear that passion in their speeches tonight. In closing, we encourage the Board of Education to work together in a respectful manner, always remembering that schools exist for children. We thank you for your time and commitment.
Thank you. Next up, we have Carol Kennedy with CDSP.
Good evening. My name is Carol Kennedy, and I live at 19 Stephanie Lane. I have both a 1st and 5th grader at Oxford. Along with Robin Nelson, I am the budget co-chair of the Council of Darien School Parents, and would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening on the superintendent's proposed 2021 school budget. First, thank you to Dr. Adley and team for presenting what we believe to be a fiscally responsible budget that carefully balances our students' interests with the rising cost environment. The CDSP supports the superintendent's proposed 2021 school budget. We believe everything included is critical to allow Darien schools to continue to operate at their current level of excellence. We also want to highlight Dr. Adley's prioritization of quality of services for our students, and we strongly support the need for these investments. Specifically, we want to thank the administration for the 4.9% increase in curriculum RC19, which includes additional funding for new textbooks, curriculum development, professional development, and ELL resources. In particular, we support the rollout of the new Math and Focus program for 5th grade and 6th through 8. With that being said, while we are thankful for a budget that protects the necessary baseline budget items, we would like to request the Board of Ed and District continue to emphasize the need for ongoing investment to enrich the education of our students, even in the face of budget headwinds. In the 2017-18 operating dollars accounted for 17.4% of total expenses, but in the 2021 budget they have fallen to only 15.9%. Operating dollars represent the student's budget, and it is discomforting to see this percentage decrease. This percentage decrease is directly correlated to rising healthcare and personnel costs, absorbing a bigger piece of the pie. We would argue that fixed costs are likely to remain static and may even increase further in the future. As a community, we cannot be afraid to build budgets that take into account increased fixed costs and move beyond fulfilling just our students' baseline needs. We encourage the administration and board to strongly advocate adding back to the budget where they feel there is a true need. For example, we join Mrs. Stein in support of funding Project Lead the Way, equipment and materials at the middle school, rather than deferring this budget item to the 21-22 school year. This initiative is an important part of our STEM program and needs to be supported. In closing, we would like to thank Dr. Adley, the administration, and the Board of Ed for your time and your dedication on behalf of our students. We are hopeful that the new strategic planning effort will create a roadmap for implementation of future initiatives to ensure that we keep Darien schools at the forefront of our DIRG. Sustaining excellence requires strategic vision and ongoing expenditure in curriculum, professional development, and programming. Even when we are faced with rising healthcare and pension costs or decreased excess cost reimbursements, we must continue to invest in both our existing assets and new initiatives. Thank you for your time.
Robin Nelson, CDSP.
Good evening. My name is Robin Nelson, and I live at 51 Arrowhead Way. I have a 5th grader at Tokenique, a 7th grader at Middlesex, and an 8th grader who will be attending Darien High School next year. Along with Carol Kennedy, I am budget co-chair for the CDSP, and I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. We appreciate that a key goal of Dr. Adley's proposed budget is to protect class sizes, as highlighted in the superintendent's budget presentation. However, we are concerned that there is not enough funding and budget control to maintain optimum elementary class sizes, especially in light of recent enrollment trends. We appreciate that predicting enrollment can be difficult and recognize the thoroughness of the Malone and McBroom enrollment study upon which our current budget is based. However, our town is in the middle of massive change. Downtown revitalization, new multifamily developments, and having one of the best school districts in the state are all things that drive new families to Darien. These additional factors make future enrollment unpredictable. Already, the 2019-20 actual enrollment is 14 more students than the consultant's high projection model. Likewise, factoring in January 2020 actual enrollment, our projected 2020-21 enrollment is forecast to be 10 more students than the high enrollment projection and 22 more students than forecast in the current budget. Since October 1st, we have had 10 net new elementary students, which results in 5 sections at the tipping point of potentially needing another section. Our primary concern is that the proposed budget has only 4 teachers in budget control and no funding for a potential ELL teacher. Class sizes at the elementary level continue to be an essential piece of our educational success. As recently as 6 years ago, Darien parents advocated for the Board of Ed to decrease its elementary class sizes to the optimal levels that were consistent with other Durgay districts. Fortunately, since that time, the Board of Ed prioritized the necessity of maintaining optimal class sizes. Today, we would like to reiterate this need, specifically with regard to the 5 sections that are projected to be above optimal, where a new section would be needed. We ask that you carefully assess whether budget control has adequate funding to maintain optimal class sizes, given our current enrollment trend. Additionally, we feel that budget control should also include funds to cover an ELL teacher if needed. In closing, we would like to thank Dr. Adley for his stated goal of protecting class sizes in a difficult budget year. Thank you again for your careful analysis and deliberation in support of sustaining excellence in Darien schools.
Jeanna Vermeilski, CDSP.
Hi, my name is Jeanna Vermeilski, and I live at 95 Raymond Street. I am the co-vice chair of the Tokenique PTO. I am speaking tonight on behalf of the Council of Darien School Parents. We are asking for the Board of Education to ensure Budget Control has capacity to provide an ELL teacher for the 2020-2021 school year. Our school system aims to support all learners, which should include the ones who cannot advocate for themselves because of a language barrier. Since the 2015-2016 school year, the number of ELL students has increased from 11 to 66. We are excited to see this trend of diversification and feel it is very likely to continue. We know the current needs of these English learners are being met using current SRBI and special education teachers. This means that an increase in services for any of these subgroups, children requiring intervention, children with disabilities, or English learners, will stretch those teaching resources to a breaking point. Instead of playing an unending game of scheduling Tetris and crossing our fingers that we can continue to make it work, we believe it is in our students' best interest to get ahead of the problem. For this reason, we are asking for you to consider increasing budget control to more realistically capture the staffing needs of our children. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight and wish to acknowledge the work done by the Board of Ed to address the needs of all of our learners. Thank you.
Lisa Sarusi, CDSP.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Sarusi, and I live at 12 Rings End Road in Darien. I'm the parent of 2 sophomores at Darien High School. I'm the parent rep for Darien Council of Darien School Parents Special Education Subcommittee and Darien High School Parents Association Special Ed Committee. Thank you, Dr. Adley, for prioritizing the one-to-one technology device initiative and budgeting for replacement Chromebooks for grades 3rd through 5th and iPads for 9th graders. We hope that the Board of Ed will continue to support this program. We believe that our students are benefiting from this initiative and that our increased use of digital curriculum resources necessitates ongoing funding of these devices. Therefore, we must question the Board of Ed's proposal to cut iPads for the 9th graders from the budget. We strongly feel that it is important to evaluate usage and the overall effectiveness of iPads as a curriculum tool for our high school students. But we believe any action without that evaluation and understanding would be premature, given that the one-to-one initiative is still in its early stages. For instance, one tool that's still being incorporated is the Logitech Crayon. The Logitech crayons allow users to handwrite on their iPads. Students can take notes, complete handwritten math assessments, and write on teachers' digitally delivered handouts. This is a new and exciting way for students and teachers to interact and learn. The Logitech Crayon will also be helpful to some students who have IEPs and academic accommodations. But without the new iPads that support this technology, the value of this tool will not be fully realized. Additionally, it is unclear how the Board of Ed would expect the district to proceed with the one-to-one initiative without 9th grade iPads, given that curriculum has already been designed to incorporate the use of these iPads with the crayon technology, along with professional development for teachers to utilize these new tools. The rapidly evolving nature of technology will always necessitate that we continue to evaluate and adapt our curriculum and teaching methods to new modes of technology. These unanswered questions are all the more reason to keep the 9th grade iPad replacement in the budget so that we have sufficient time to gather all the relevant information and propose new ways to move forward while maintaining the near-term integrity of the one-to-one initiative. Finally, we support the Board of Ed proposal to cut $65,000 in replacement Chromebook orders. We agree that there is a need for replacement within the 3rd to 5th grades. to support the new state testing requirements. However, we believe that the administration could reduce the order quantity of new and spare Chromebooks to better align with projected enrollment, which would free up funding for some of the administration's budget deferrals. In conclusion, we ask that the district stay the course until we have a better picture of the full one-to-one initiative implementation, including the actual
Mrs.
usage
Saru,
data.
you are approaching time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adley and the Board of Ed.
Laurie, Olson, and Joan Canlian from DHSPA.
Good evening. I'm Joan Canlian. I live at 9 McLaren Road. I have 2 children, a DHS graduate now in college and a current DHS student as well.
I am Laurie Olson. I live at 16 Little Brook Road North. I have 3 children, 1 at Middlesex and 2 at Darien High School. We are the co-chairs of the Darien High School Parents Association. We want to start by thanking the Board of Education, Dr. Adley, and the administration for the time and effort they put into helping make our schools better for all of the children in our district. Our first request, which has become an annual request, is for more consistency in athletics. We support the addition of 4 assistant coaches in the budget based on increased student participation. Year after year, parents express frustrations with the major discrepancies among sports teams' facilities, equipment, and uniforms. Last fall, tennis court renovations were originally included in the budget's priority 1 projects, but were moved to a level 2. We strongly support the proposed rebuilding of the tennis courts in this budget. For years, visiting teams have been shocked by the extremely poor conditions of our tennis courts. 1 court is not even usable due to water intrusion. The high school tennis teams need safe and playable tennis courts. However, the tennis team has repeatedly asked for an additional 2 courts so that they can host FCAC and state championship tournaments. Several DHS athletic teams enjoy superior facilities, and we ask the board to seriously consider adding 2 additional courts in the future. Equipment inconsistency among athletics is another issue. Our current wrestling mats are a safety hazard, as wrestlers must carry extremely heavy 15 and 25-year-old mats to competitions. These outdated mats were not designed to be portable. Athletes have injured themselves carrying the mats and have been forced to miss part of the wrestling season. Yet we have golf carts to carry drinks and supplies to the field for some of our other sports teams. As for uniforms, the athletic director proposed a new uniform schedule 2 years ago, which appeared to be a good step toward parity. It's disappointing to see athletes still wearing frayed, ill-fitting uniforms 2 years later. We are lacking necessary fundamental policies, and we are lacking enforcement of the policies that are in place. Parents continue to request clear policies and proportional, consistent enforcement to meet the basic standards that all of our athletes deserve. We have a few safety concerns, including students' long and dangerous walking routes to school, and we understand that busing solutions will be addressed in the near future. However, we would like to know why the DHS security booth originally proposed in the 2019-20 budget was moved to 2021-22 budget. We were disappointed last year that the security booth was moved from a level 1 to a level 2 priority capital project. Traffic and environmental studies were completed, and we supported the police findings that DHS is unprotected. DHS parents have not forgotten that an intoxicated driver drove into the school's loop and crashed into the guardrail last year. As stated clearly in Board of Ed meetings last spring, the security booth was supposed to be a top priority this year. We want to be sure that this important safety measure is not repeatedly postponed.
Mrs. Olson, you are over time. If you could wrap up.
Great. In closing, we would like to mention civility. Republicans and Democrats all work to improve our schools and should be able to disagree without disrespect. Every voice should be heard, but we should talk to each other, not at each other or about each other on social media. We send our students to school to work together, respect differences, and solve problems. We are setting an example. Our children are watching. Our town is watching. Civility starts with us.
Next, we have Tara Worm from CDSP DAEG, and if anyone would like to sign in that has not, it is still up here.
Hi, I'm going to be quick. Good evening. My name is Tara Worm. I live at 17 Mystic Lane, and I have 2 children, one at the middle school and one at the high school. I am one of the CDSP budget reps at both the middle school and the high school, as well as the advocacy chair for DAEG. Thank you to Dr. Adley and the administration for a very thoughtful budget, the Board of Education for the time and dedication to our children. I know we all want to give our students every opportunity and advantage we can without breaking the bank. I would like to show my support for this year's budget with the addition of Project Lead the Way at the middle school. One of the district goals and objectives in the 2019-20 budget is, quote, create a plan for future work that offers students balanced coursework that serves to create a science, technology, engineering, mathematics mindset. Creator, critical thinker, innovator, entrepreneur, change maker, and communicator. Project Lead the Way's project-based STEM programs fit perfectly with this objective. We were very excited last year when the Gateway program was added to the curriculum, and we would like to see the district not only continue to support Project Lead the Way, but add in new programs such as computer science, engineering, and/or biomedical science. Thank you.
I'll make copies and get it to the board. Thank you. Mia Mahopoulos and Christina Budeau, DAEG.
Good evening. I'm Christina Budeau. I live at 4 Kona Road, and I have 2 children, one at the middle school and one at Royal.
I'm Mia Mahopoulos at 3 Mansfield Place, and I have 3 sons, one at Middlesex and 2 at Royal, and we are here as co-presidents of DAEG. Very briefly, we would like to express DAEG's strong support for the 9th grade IDEA Achievers class, which is the final year of our Gifted and Talented offering within the district. While we recognize that there is low enrollment in that elective class this year, this seems to be an outlier of an otherwise strong program with a track record of historically solid enrollment. We would agree that perhaps there are factors that should be looked at and addressed to encourage more consistent year-over-year enrollment. For example, supporting our 8th graders with selecting their chosen independent study project while still in middle school. In addition, perhaps earlier identification of the mentors that will guide them for the duration of their 9th grade class could help make it easier and less daunting for students to select Achievers as one of their electives during the stressful period of freshman year course selection. The Achievers program offers 9th graders a chance to complete a year-long study of a topic of their choice and to truly delve into that selected topic, utilizing an approach like many college-level independent study courses. What a fantastic opportunity for those intellectually driven students willing and able to rise to the challenge. We respectfully ask that any discussions about potential changes to Achievers be considered within the context of our district's broader strategic planning effort and not just within the budget process. We want to conclude by thanking Dr. Adley and the administration for working with us and for continuing to show your support and commitment to the IDEA program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brooke Kennedy, parent.
Hi, I'm Brooke Kennedy, 6 Walden Road, and I have 3 sons at Darien High School. I'm here tonight to talk about the need for the new wrestling mats at DHS. I know the board has heard about all the specific standard upgrades that come with new mats, so I won't review those points, but I just wanted to reiterate the need, because although our current mats are deemed safe, they're substandard to current wrestling guidelines. The team is currently in need of 2 mats, as two mats are needed to host a multi-school meet, which we do multiple times during the season. The cost of the replacement of these 2 mats is approximately $17,800. It's very important for these mats to be replaced before any athletes get hurt using these substandard mats. We actually have an example this weekend. The team was at a tournament in Milford, and one of our athletes suffered a concussion on very similar, they were the similar style, permanent style mats that we have at Darien High School, but they actually were in much better condition than our mats are. And then lastly, I'd like to point out that our wrestling program is a growing sport at DHS. In just a few short years, the team has grown from 4 kids to 8 kids, and now this year we're at 14 with a full team. And 6 of those 14 kids are freshmen from the great youth program that's been started in the last couple years. And we feel that this growing trend for wrestling only increases the need for quality, safe new mats. I hope you consider funding these new mats and keep our wrestlers safe. Thanks for your time.
James Netter, student.
James Netter, 7 Lane. I've been on the team for 3 years now, captain for 2 of those years. And we've been hoping, we've been promised actually for the past 2 years that we'd get a new mat. And it's been taken out of the budget multiple times. And I'm just glad to see that it's finally becoming like a big issue. Not big, but it's being noticed for once. I know we're not a massive team, but we are growing. And yeah, I just thank you for your time.
Thank you. Brian Moss, parent.
Hi, good evening. Brian Moss, 71 Norotan Avenue. I have 2 students in the district, a 5th grader and an 8th grader, and it's recently come to my attention, since my daughter is going to be in high school next year, that there's no busing if you're outside of a 2-mile radius of the school. So we live on Norotan Avenue, and I've commuted to New York City for 10 years, and I'm guilty of it myself. And you're trying to run and make a train, you go a little faster than you should, you cut a little bit of corners, and I've also in my car and also walked that path up Norotan Avenue, which would lead to the high school, and it's a treacherous path. So you have the 95, exit 10 coming off 95, and you have a crosswalk there, you have cars going north, making the left turn to go on 95 and to make a train, and then southbound, the walkway is not positioned whereby you can see people in the pedestrian walkway. So the only way you can see people in the walkway is if you've already made the turn, which is frankly too late to make an evasive maneuver. I'm frankly afraid to make that walk, let alone I have a young 8th grader, she's only 13, soon to be 14 in 9th grade. To ask these kids to walk that path, I think, is treacherous. As much as I commend getting new mats for the wrestling team and new tennis courts, I think basic safety needs to be addressed first. If the average person walks at a rate of 3.1 miles per hour, so 2 miles radius is going to be roughly 40 minutes for a student to get to high school. It's a lot of time, and most importantly, it's the safety. Going up Norotan Avenue is really treacherous. If you're in a different road, different path, there really is no alternative path to make that journey to the school other than having somebody drive you. So I just like the board to really consider that. There are some people here with placards up, so please seriously consider that.
Thank you. Joe Testa, resident.
Good evening, everybody. Joe Testa, 111 Hollow Tree Ridge Road. I am assistant coach for the high school wrestling team, and I run and head coach of the youth wrestling program. I'm here to, again, speak about the mats, and I know that they've been deemed safe, and I can only speak on my experience. I wrestled at Darien High School, and I know that the mats we currently wrestle on were new when I was a junior in high school, which puts them at over 14 years old. The storage mat, the spare mat we have in storage, that's from at least the 90s. So these mats are getting older. The material is starting to fray and rip, which allows fungus and other bad things to set into the mats. Now we clean them every day, at least twice a day. But it still is a little bit of a safety concern that we'd like to address. We mentioned the high school team is growing. My youth program is growing as well. I'm up to about 40 kids across 2 programs, and squeezing them all onto one mat can be a little bit challenging. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time to ask you guys, and like everyone else has, to hopefully include these in the new budget. I think there's something that definitely needs to be addressed. And like I said, they might not be unsafe yet, but we're certainly approaching that. All right.
Jackie Miller, parent.
Hi, I'm Jackie Miller, and I live at 84 Fitch Avenue. I have 2 children in the Darien Public Schools in the 9th and 7th grades, respectively. I want to thank the administration and the members of the Board of Education for the attention they've paid to the busing issues we've brought before them the last few months, and I agree that we should be thoughtful in considering any policy revision moving forward. At the same time, however, the current bus policy allows both the board and the administration to make exceptions to the walking radius when hazardous conditions exist without revising the policy. I believe those conditions exist now and will only worsen with the extensive construction projects that will be occurring on Heights Road, Hollow Tree Ridge, and Norotan. Though we're still waiting for the results of a traffic study requested by the BOE, we already know from the analysis of existing conditions performed by Ty and Bond for the Norotan Heights Shopping Center in November 2016, by Malone and McBroom for the Federated Realty Project in April 2017, and by the Western Connecticut Council of Governments for the Norotan Heights train station in October 2018, that intersections at Norotan and Ledge and Norotan and Heights are at or exceeding vehicular capacity during the weekday morning rush. The one kind of traffic you won't find on Norotan Avenue is student pedestrian traffic, because it's so manifestly unsafe that few parents would allow their children to walk, especially in the pre-sunrise hours when our children would be leaving for their 50-minute walk in order to get to the high school by the first bell at 7:40 a.m. For these reasons, while the board decides whatever policy review is appropriate, I ask the board to fund 1 additional bus for the 2020-2021 school year, which Mr. Rudel has estimated at a cost of $85,000. This bus would serve DHS students who live south of 95, north of the Post Road, between Hecker Avenue and Hollow Tree Ridge, who are not currently eligible for bus service and who will be most impacted by temporary construction. As a tiered bus, this can also alleviate some of the crowded conditions that exist on elementary school buses. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Nick Ritchie, student.
Nick Ritchie, 154 Tokenique Road. I've been in the wrestling program for a while at not just Darien High School, but I was actually in the youth program, I believe, during its first year. And we are a growing program, and again, the 40 kids in our youth program, I think, really speak to that. And while there's not a lot of us now, there's going to be much more kids in the future. In fact, I believe I'm one of 4 athletes on our team now that have come up through the youth program. And I do understand that budgetary reasons are cause it's not the easiest thing to fund for mats, but I've been there for a while, and I don't think it could hurt just to, if we're able to replace the mats. I don't think that's a bad idea, because it is, again, very hard to transport them up and down the stairs, get them in the gyms for multi-meets and such, which we do have multiple times a year. So I just don't think it could hurt if we're able to do so. Thank you for your time.
Kelly Scallon, parent.
Good evening. I come before you again in the spirit of improving transportation safety for our high school students. This time specifically for the students living along the Town Hall and Norotan Avenue corridor. The issue at hand is one of safety, and at the conclusion of my comments, I hope it is clear to you why we request that an exception be made for our neighborhood and a bus be provided. As a reminder, the area in question is Norotan Avenue, south of I-95, and extending to the Post Road. These neighborhoods have no bus transportation to the high school due to the 2-mile transportation zone policy. This group of students is expected to walk 55 minutes to school each morning and afternoon, a 2-hour commute. At least 50% of the school year, their journey begins in darkness at 6:40 a.m. before the sun has risen. And with their phone flashlights in hand, the walk begins. Traversing over 2 Interstate 95 exit ramps, the northbound I-95 access street of Hecker Avenue, the commercial entrances of not one, but 3 gas stations and the Chase Bank. But this is all information you already know. What is new are several construction projects in the Norotan Avenue vicinity. The Heights Road project already underway, and the sidewalk improvement projects at Ledge and Heights Roads. And all of this means an increase in traffic. The WestCog survey found that Norotan Avenue at Ledge and Heights Roads were at capacity and unacceptable in 2018. The results of these studies are the very studies that led to Darien's intersection improvement projects, which will roll out later this year. However, these conclusive traffic studies were not deemed entirely satisfactory by the BOE. The BOE is presently awaiting the results of a police department traffic study before making a decision on whether or not Norotan Avenue is safe to walk. The only problem with this is there is no traffic study being done. In fact, a request was sent to the police department to conduct a pedestrian survey on West Avenue at Norotan, which has no bearing on the intersections in question. Now that the facts have been outlined, let's remind ourselves of the Board of Education's policy on hazardous conditions, which states the administration shall consider the following guidelines for hazardous conditions when making decisions: construction, snow piled on the walk area, making it unusable, commercial entrances and exits where cars are crossing walking areas at speeds in excess of 5 miles per hour, and the like. This checks many of the very issues we have pointed out numerous times on Norotan Avenue. Understanding that redevelopment occurs, the board's policy allows for the sitting superintendent to make exceptions under the applicability and exceptions clause.
Mrs. Scallon, if you could wrap up, you are over time.
Surely. So this essentially gives our superintendent an exception to the rule, to make a variance, if you will, an exception for any neighborhood that he deems unsafe or where he feels that reasonable judgment would say that the area is simply unsafe. So as outlined above, the Norotan Avenue poses specific geographical distinctions, making it unsafe for students to walk. It is for these reasons we respectfully request that an exception be made. Norotan Avenue, a walk not worth the risk. Hashtag let them ride.
Kelly Gartrell.
My name's Kelly Gartrell, 10 Dickinson Road. I have a 9th grader at DHS and an 8th grade daughter at MMS. Just to piggyback on some of the things that Kelly and Jackie pointed out, we're extremely concerned about the walk. What we wanted to do was, even though we're doing a police study at Norotan and West, pretty much everybody south of theirs is the concern is, walking up to Norotan and West. So we wanted to get a quick pulse of people in the neighborhood and what they really thought, parents. So we asked 2 key takeaways. One, 96% of the people in our neighborhood were not aware that they weren't eligible for a bus living within 2 miles, some of which who had moved from LA, who specifically chose this neighborhood in Darien and to have transportation. And then another key takeaway was we asked a question, if bus transportation was not an option, would you let your child walk to school? 97% indicated no, they would not, because it was not safe. So again, we're asking for a bus, and hopefully we'll make it in the budget. Thanks.
No one else has signed in. Is there anyone else who'd like to sign in and speak? I see. Ready? You could do it. We're not scared. Come on. Go ahead. You tell me your name, I'll sign you in. How about that? Can you spell your last name, Jacob?
Golden.
Golden, sorry. My hearing, I'm old. And your address, Jacob?
37 Richmond Drive.
Thank you. Feel free to start.
I'm part of the Darien Wrestling Youth Program, and our mats are older than me, and I was born in 2008, and what's so funny?
Jacob is speaking, everybody.
And if you look at them, like, they are kind of getting like green and yellow because they're getting moldy, and there's like, you could see marks everywhere. And I do believe that we need new mats because, like, I had an event at New Canaan High School a few weeks ago, and their mats were new, and it was way bigger.
That was the way to do it, Jacob.
It's a much better experience to do it, and since the flu is going around, I don't think a moldy mats would help anything. I think it's just a breeding ground for the flu. So I think we need new mats I think we should get a few new mats.
Thank you.
Can he talk about iPads or something?
Yeah, Jacob, can you talk about the rest of our budget? Is there anyone else who would like to sign in or make a comment for public comment before I close the hearing? Please come on up. And if you could give us your name and your address.
My name is Murat Yasanlıya from 88 Fitch Avenue.
All right, you're going to have to spell it for me. I'm sorry. Or I can hand it to you and you can write it down. How about that?
Do you want to get started? And then
Yes, go ahead.
So, again, I want to make a comment about bus services. If I live in 88 Fitch Avenue, which is exactly 2 miles from, the school, Deran High School. My kids now at middle school and elementary school. But when I look at this service, I look at the necessity. I know most people here, they talk about the iPad, they talk about the wrestling, I guess, a mat, but we are talking about here the safety of our kids. So while we are doing this budget, you have to think about the fairness. You are providing services to portion of a town, but when it comes to people who live within 2 miles, you are saying that we cannot provide it because apparently state guidelines. But state guidelines also ask you to consider all these conditions and then make decision. As most people here indicated that it takes 45 minutes to walk 2 miles. It's more than 1.5 hours a day. You are asking our kids to walk in the rain, in the snow, all these cold conditions, and then without, I guess, when I look at this one, again, don't get me wrong, I'm coming from a developing country. In my country, we don't walk 40 minutes to school. There is a bus system. And I'm living in Darien, Connecticut. When I mentioned about that I'm living in Connecticut, Darien, Connecticut, they said, oh my God, you are living in the beautiful town. Yes, it's a beautiful town, but in this beautiful town, we want bus service to our kids. And I think it's our basic right. When you look at this one, don't think about that we are requesting this right to given us. I think it's a discrimination. It's really, you cannot, I pay my property tax, and I know that portion of my property tax goes to school bus system. So I'm not getting refund from the local government and say that, hey, Murat, you are living within 2 miles, you are not using the bus system, we will not tax you this much money, but we will reduce your tax money 20%. I don't get it. So my money, tax money, also goes to whole town that use the bus system. So why not my kids doesn't use? Not allowed to use, I guess. Again, for all our parents, I guess this is not just asking, but requesting that you should consider this seriously before all other, I guess, requests.
Thank you. You are over time. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening? All right, with that, we will close the public hearing and we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the further review of the 2020-2021 budget. Although we thank all those who came out to speak tonight. Thank you. They need to go home, do their homework.
Jacob's like, I don't want to stay. I want a little more attention.
I know.
He's like,
We'll be public comment later, too.
oh, dear. Good job.
You're very welcome. You did a very nice job, Jacob. Thank you. Okay, well, we're gonna remove these from the table. Yeah, we can move these. We'll receive it like we receive everything else. Jill, do you want to pass them over here? We'll receive it like we receive everything else then.
No, thank you.
Alrighty, further budget review. We'll move on. The administration did follow up with questions. Are we putting the board questions up or no?
Yes, we are, I think.
I'm up here. It was getting a little cold. Thank you for shutting that door.
Madam Chair, in the meantime, does everybody have the documentation that was distributed?
Yes. And Rich handed out a new page 116 for your budget book. If he could speak to that. No comment? We'll take the questions that the administration had from last time, if there's any follow-up on those, and then if there's any follow-up this evening. No luck?
No.
Okay.
We can't what?
All right, well, if everyone wants to pull up
Doesn't work.
their copies. If not, I can run through.
Dr. De Silva on?
We're texting.
Is it just on these, on the questions or new questions?
We can take new questions too. We were going to run through what we had, but if you want to start with
I
new
have a-
questions, why Dr. De Silva comes and saves the day.
I just have a new
I was
question.
really going to do it, Susan.
New question.
Shirley, none of us believed you, just so you know.
Given what we heard tonight, and there was something in a packet we got about the tennis courts, can we get the dollar number that it would be to add 2 more tennis courts? Just so we understand what we're talking about, if we did want to put 2 additional tennis courts in the budget, what that dollar number would be.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
I guess first to clarify too that there is room up there.
Room. I think Chris said, or
I've
Mike
heard it.
Lynch said that there was, but confirm that, and then what the dollar amount would be. Also, what it would be if we delayed and did 2 later, how much do you save by doing it together?
Okay. I have a question because I think we're confusing 2 issues with transportation. We certainly could look at transportation, but Dr. Adley, you also have the right within this budget to make a recommendation if you believe there's either hazardous conditions or any of the conditions are met within the policy. And I need the administration to separate that out for the board. If there is an area that has already met a hazardous condition, we should be addressing that. If there is a different, something that we need to account for in the future, then that would be a budgetary item. But if we believe we have a hazardous condition, or we have, I think sunup and sundown is in the policy, we believe we have children leaving for sunup, that's something that we would need to meet in this budget with a recommendation from the superintendent and an understanding of that transfer.
So, if I thought that was inherently unsafe right now, I would have come to you before this to say it's inherently unsafe, right? Is it ideal? No. Is it far from ideal? Probably, right? But I don't believe it's inherently unsafe. It's not ideal, but that's a different standard.
Okay, and then I don't know if the board or the administration has the studies. I have not reviewed them myself, Ty and Bond and Westcogs. Do we have those? Or I'm sure we could get them from the town.
We can get them. We're trying to follow up with some of those studies
Okay.
too.
Oh, we're ready. Does anyone else have any questions on that particular issue? And sorry, my last one, just off of some of these comments, and it's my understanding that the police are looking at the intersections in question, not just one particular intersection. Is that the case? North and west?
The police are looking at the whole Norotan and also all of the walking routes.
Okay.
Could I follow up on that question?
Mr. Steeney?
What's the timing, do you think? Have they given you an update on that?
Yeah, we've just got an initial communication. I have to go back to the police chief about what he said for the moment. So
okay.
So we should be certainly by next week probably wrapped up with that. I'm hoping. Yep.
Dennis.
Mr. Maroney.
And what is the outcome of this study? What are we hoping to? What data do we anticipate finding from this study? I guess is a better.
Essentially, I'm looking for the police to be able to tell me whether these walking routes are safe or unsafe, and additionally, would they be willing to put in crossing guards anywhere up Norotan Avenue?
Okay.
So that's the issue I want to separate for the board. If we feel that there's an area or the superintendent recommends an area that it meets unsafe conditions, that's actually an immediate remedy within this budget we would find. There is a separate question of whether we either want to look at a policy around 2 miles or we need money for transportation. But one is an immediate within this budget and the other is going forward projecting. So we would need some more information to know where we are given specific factors. Mr.
Sorry,
Murray?
as a follow-up to that, so if we do a crossing guard, what is a crossing guard cost, and would we put them, I assume, at different locations there as well?
It's plausibly at different locations. They are looking at all the locations. Do you know what the crossing guard fee is?
So crossing guards
the
are...
crossing guards are in the police department's budget, and they're paid by the town. So we would have to find out from the town what they would pay.
I think we need that information, because I have no idea what a crossing guard costs, but if it gets close to the bus, then which is better to do?
I think again, in this budget, what I would recommend, it seems like there have been concerns made about hazardous conditions. Those conversations need to happen with the superintendent. If those conditions are found to be hazardous, then there is a responsibility on the Board of Education to remedy that in some way. And then we need to also probably look going forward with transportation. What are we looking at? Mr. Maroney.
And as a point to that, I think I would personally like to have more clarification on, if I recall and from my notes, that the state standard is 2 miles. Majority of districts do 1.5 or 1 mile, and yet we received an email from a parent that was saying there's certain towns do 5,000 feet, others have no parameters. So I'm a little confused as to what the rule is of our surrounding towns.
So we do have a comparison. There's some towns that don't have walkways and so on. You can give the update, Richard.
It primarily has to do whether or not a community has sidewalks. So if you look in Durgay, us in Ridgefield at the high school level are 2 miles, and then New Canaan is 1 mile. Communities like Westport, Weston, and East Reading don't have sidewalks, so pretty much everybody gets a bus.
Okay, so unless anyone has any specific questions on that, do I see your hand go up, Mrs. McCammon?
Can we just please, because I like to confirm next steps, please be clear. So we're having a presentation on next week, as I understood it. We're hearing about the preliminary findings about busing.
Well, you'll hear, well, whatever we hear back from the police department, that's what I'll report back on, yes.
So what's the general outline we'll be hearing next week, in your opinion?
I'm hoping that we'll hear, if my parents are here, they're probably hoping we hear that it's unsafe and they says there's areas you're gonna have to deal with. I'm hoping that's not the case, because otherwise we'd be working under a condition that is unsafe, but if it is, it is. So I'm looking at them to look at the walking routes and determine, are they inherently unsafe? And then specifically the North Open, and are they willing, do you think that they would put in crossing guards there if need be?
Is there a standard for crossing guards? Some places I see them that make sense. Some of the crosswalks we're talking about, they seem to make sense to me, but they're not there. Whether you have it or not, I think it would, for us to continue to make an informed decision, it'd be nice to understand the standards around a crossing guard.
Oh, sorry. The actual police chief himself is actually asking the same question about the different locations in town, whether they're necessary there or not. I can't speak to the specific specifications around it, but I can speak to the fact that the police chief himself is looking at where they're supposed to be versus where they are versus where they're being utilized or not. So, but I'll have to find out what the specification is. I think you have some latitude to actually place a crossing guard, but I can find out.
Okay, oh, two hands. Mr. Cini.
So I see this as two issues. We have an immediate budget issue that we need to fulfill as a board. The longer term, I hear there's a lot of questions about policy and safety beyond this budget cycle. So if I could respectfully ask that this board starts to create a discussion around everything we've been asking, but separate from the budget item. We're going to determine what we're going to do with this budget. But it seems like a broader discussion well beyond this budget, and a policy review, and maybe even a look at the policy committee. I don't know when the chair and the superintendent might be able to find time, but I think given the amount of public attention to the matter and public comment, and over the many weeks, last several weeks, that would be something that we might think to add.
I second that point.
Mrs. McCammon, did I see your hand go up?
Yes. Did I understand you correctly last week that you'd received a walkability report?
No, I found it online.
Oh.
We're talking about the pedestrian study?
Yeah.
That was done 5 years ago.
I think you can find it over on the
It's on the Board of
Selectmen's website. I think that's
stuff in the town plan too.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I just looked, so. Really.
It's easily accessible.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so let's move on to follow up on questions last year, and then we can move to any new question. Last week, feels like a year. And then we can move on to any new questions. Can we move gifted monies from DHS to MMS and elementary schools? What would be the program impact? Does anyone have any follow-up on that, or is that sufficiently answered? Okay, how many children are in the DHS gifted program? We have that number. Can we scroll up?
Can I just ask a question on the ideas stuff? I know we just got an email at the high school that course registration is starting for spring. When will the registration happen for for Achievers for the fall? When do 8th graders register for their high school courses?
I'm not 100% sure on the day. I can find out. I'm not 100% sure. I'll find out for you. Okay. You want to know when 8th graders?
Now 9th grade, the high schoolers are registering in February for their fall classes. So is that?
So the Principal Somers just sent out the registration letter, I want to say last Friday.
Is there, could we get a sense of the 51? How many are looking to take Achievers? I mean, if we have that data prior to our February 11th, I think that would be helpful.
I don't think we'll have that data before next Tuesday.
So I will say this is my question, and I put it up, and really I put it up because I'd like us to monitor this. I probably agree with the statement that 1 year's worth of data is not really enough to determine the viability of a program, but I do think I am signaling to the public in my individual capacity that this is a program that I think we need to watch and really understand going forward from a budgetary standpoint. That's why I posed the question, because I think we have to be aware of tracking this program. So I don't know that it is unnecessarily that will be impactful in this budget, but going forward, I think we should keep an eye on it. Are the athletic coaches nice to have or required for safety reasons? Does anyone have any follow-up on this particular answer? Nope. Okay. Can you tell us, can someone scroll up for me?
It's down.
Can you tell us more about the safety of the wrestling mats and regulations? We've heard lots about that tonight. Maybe, Dr. Adley, you could speak to the idea that we're hearing safety concerns, especially tonight, and there are no safety concerns.
So I actually went over to look at the mats myself, and I'll go to a wrestling match when I went over to look at the mats themselves. Well, first of all, around safety, having had several discussions with the athletic director and him through the actual coach themselves, there are no safety concerns that I have been made aware of after clarification regarding these mats. The mats that are there, I believe the ones that are in the main dedicated area are generally the ones that are used for the matches, I believe. Now, the ones in the storage room are clearly like 25 to 30-year-olds, right? But they're still usable. My understanding, if I've got this right, is that they are used once or twice a year for some multi-purpose matches. That doesn't mean to say if they're unsafe, they shouldn't be used at all. I'm not saying that, but they're not unsafe. That's relatively just a context. So I have no reason to think that they're unsafe. Whether we want to upgrade them, that's a different, it's just a different question.
Board questions, Mr. Burke.
With regard to making the safety determination, obviously we're safe now, our students will be there, but this is really talking about next year. Is there any kind of specific testing that can be done on the mats to determine whether or not they have the proper resistance and traction and integrity? I recall when we had the issue with whether or not to put off the football field replacement for a year, there were scientific reviews of that turf. I'm wondering if there's that kind of testing that's available for the mats, and if that's been undertaken.
Well, that certainly hasn't been brought to my attention, and I'm unaware of any. That doesn't mean to say there aren't any. But I think the assistant coach said tonight that they're safe, but it's down the line. I think just interpret his words.
Thank you.
So, do we have a standard? Because I feel, having had these conversations now for a number of years, we had them around football helmets a couple of years ago because we wanted a good safety concussion rating. I guess what I need to hear from the administration, are we looking at minimum safety requirements when we make decisions around sports? Do we have a threshold for a safety requirement or best practice?
I don't have a minimum or a high threshold for safety. Safety. I wouldn't be. Look, I'd love to give the kids mats, right? So that's not the issue, right? The question is, are they safe? The answer back is yes, they are safe. If you want them nicer, up to date, more presentation and just contemporarized for the kids, then that's a different question too. That's all.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh,
Yeah.
Mr. Janine.
I'm still not convinced they're safe because I've heard too many different things. I've also heard too many different ages of these mats. You just brought more information to light about there's certain mats in a closet that are used for certain meets. So once again, I think my frustration is we're not always presented with all the information or all the facts, and they kind of emerge over the course of these conversations, which is frustrating. My other issue is equity amongst all these sports, all right? And we've plowed, thanks to incredible donations in the DF, millions of dollars into fields and other athletics. So I think you also have to approach this from an equity standpoint, all right? And we're talking about mats for a team that's growing. These kids are working very hard. They see what other schools have. They're moving the mats around themselves, which I don't necessarily agree with. So I think you have to go back and really rethink from an equity standpoint. I'm not convinced there is not a safety issue And based on the ages that I've heard 10, I've heard 12, I've heard 15, I've heard 30, I've heard 20. Again, bring us a chart with the concrete information in it. It's all over the map, this conversation, for the last several weeks. And I personally, I'm like, for whatever the cost of the mats are for this district, we shouldn't be having this conversation. There should be a regular, routine, whatever you call it, purchasing and replacing this stuff after a certain amount of years. That should just be routine for this district.
So the routineness, that's a fair comment. I will say that the athletic director, the coach, they went and looked at the regulations that are in place that may not be scientific, but are they compliant with those? And the answer to that is yes. I don't think we've been all over the map, and respectfully, Duke, that are we saying they're safe or unsafe? I believe them to be safe based on the conversations that we've had at the high school level, the equity issues and other issues, right? I recognize that, potentially.
Mr. Maroney.
I would just like to echo Mr. Deneen's comments, is that, it feels like sometimes, in these budget processes, we get just new information, because I agree with you, I'm a little confused of the age, and as well as, I had no idea we had a junior wrestling program that's using these same mats. I don't know how often. It's just, are they lugging the mats out of the closet as well? There's a lot of unknowns for this whole topic, so it's a little frustrating.
The age of the mats are, the newest ones are 15 years old. The other ones are 25 to 30 years old.
Okay.
So hold.
We'll have spent $50,000 talking about it.
That's a different discussion.
What does the music program require in terms of uniforms to order and compete in festivals, etc.? Does anyone have any follow-up on this answer? Seeing none. Can we have more information on what the services the EL would provide? Any other questions on this? Okay, what is the administration's recommendation on OpenGov? Any other questions on this? Mr. Steeney?
It's, again, respectfully along the lines that I brought up earlier regarding the busing in two separate conversations. I think earlier we heard some public comment, and it was really good public comment about getting together with the town bodies that have requested this publicly and through conversations over the last couple of years. I don't think this board has ever sat down with the other board in a public setting and kind of hashed out the need and why the need. Dr. Adley, I'm sorry you had to deal with this, but you're the third superintendent. This is the third superintendent, I think, that has been through this discussion without a kind of a formal conclusion.
I was going to make a slight comment that I don't like it either, but that's okay.
Understood. Respectfully. So well, my recommendation is going to be pass on this expenditure during this budget cycle, but if at some point we could get the relevant town bodies together as suggested by the public comment and get our heads around this, what benefits does it bring us? Because we know it doesn't bring a benefit to the district. I think you made that very clear. But we ask for things out of town budget that gives the town, limited benefit. So, in the eye of working together, I request that we do discuss this after the budget season.
Yeah, I think some of the history on that is that OpenGov was discussed a few years ago. I can follow up. I know Mr. Harmon had some conversations with town. I'm happy to follow up and get information on that, and we can relook at it again, and it may come up as a budget vote or not, but we'll continue along those lines. Can we scroll? What? I'm sorry.
No, sorry, the copier just started.
I hope those aren't exams.
Yeah. Too soon, Dr. Adley. Way too soon.
One's a little fresh.
Dr. Adley. I liked your joke, Dr. Adley.
Well, on that front, should there be a contingency fund in special education? Does anyone have any follow-ups on that? All right, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. McCannon.
One of the things that I think we encountered this year is that we sort of knew that we were going to hit less reimbursement and excess costs this year, and that this would actually be a big year. Have we looked at anticipating what the next few years look like in terms of their overall impact on the budget, so that we can ideally talk about how we might not hit such a cliff in the future?
Yes, which looks like it.
So there are going to be fluctuations both up and down. It's not going to level out. A large number of it depends on, sometimes if you have a student who has a high outplacement and maybe they come back to district, their cost could meet that threshold, but you get reimbursed less because it's not quite as high over, or possibly they're actually under the threshold and so you'll lose that amount. It's not a static number, it's a dynamic number, but we do expect fluctuations up and down. In the 5-year projection that we did, I think it was in November, within those 5 years, you are going to see it kind of go down, which you start, and next year you'll see it tick up a little bit and then go back down again, but there is no real way to smooth it out.
I think that those 5-year projections, Rich and I are a wee bit better off having lived through that and knowing what's coming for that and what to prepare for it. That's our opportunity to build that modeling in.
Great. Thank you.
And that's the end of those. Are there new questions? No new questions on the budget?
Are we going to go through
If there are any questions, the board did ask to review the Board of Finance, the RTM education, and the RTM F&B questions that were put to the administration and the administration's answers. If there are any questions on that, happy to take them. Actually, I'm happy to direct them to Dr. Adlick. Mr. Sini.
Just one follow-up, Rich and Dr. Adley. The historic data related to teacher employment, there was a question there that said there's no historic data. Are we building something going forward that we can, as we like to talk about trends lately, that we will be able to use a few years out?
Yeah, for some of the things we're actually, for the use of the fund for teachers and stuff, that we're trying to sort of build that out. If you want to be more specific than that, Richard, that's fine.
So I think you're referring to staff turnover credit?
Yeah.
So there's no way in Munis to essentially track that, but we can track that outside of Munis, and so Marge and myself will track that going forward.
But it's a go-forward basis.
It'd be a
It's too
go-forward
difficult
basis.
to do it going back.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions on those? Okay, if you now have this sheet, right? You all have, they were the I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
Just a quick follow-up to that. I'm sorry, Saru. It's not that we don't have it, it's just it's too much manpower to go back and create it.
The only way probably to do it would be to go through all the PARs that get approved, and then go back into the detailed check history of every employee. It would probably be quite cumbersome. I would imagine it would take months probably to rectify. It's almost like doing a forensic audit. So there's no real easy way. The way staff turnover works in Munis is you build that credit within your budget, and then as staff shift all over the district, that credit just kind of gets extinguished and drawn apart on, and employee job salary just kind of rewrites if the employee stays here.
Thank you for that. Sure.
So you have the sheets of the sheet that lists everything that anyone put on as an add or cut. Is there anyone anywhere on that sheet that anyone wants to ask an additional question this evening? Mrs. Ritchie.
So I believe I was the one that put the section reduction for Chromebooks, but I believe I had that at 65,000.
Yeah, I think we put this in as if that was all being removed. Since yours was a smaller amount, I think we.
So I think what we took the question as, and maybe we were mistaken, was $65,000 reduction to the equipment line item. So what's reflected is a portion of the section reduction for Chromebooks.
I was just reducing for the 3-4 Chromebooks. So that 65,000 only related to the Chromebooks for 3-4.
So we can make that adjustment. Any other additional comments on these?
Just
Mrs. McCammon.
Thank you. Clarification on the first few that are from administration. They're not in the notes below. I just assume they're just adjustments based on actuals.
For which ones?
Your first few for contracted speech, OT and PT, are those just based on the contracts?
So those were what we referenced a couple of meetings ago. So there was a question about contracted speech.
Yeah.
So if you recall, in the current year, we did make a transfer for $112,000.
That's right.
So part of it was about $50,000 was contracted in, or coded to OT-PT.
Yep.
It really should have been reflected in speech, which is the
Thank you.
reallocation.
So you can see here, administration recommendations, BOE recommendations, either adds or cuts. We will have our add cut night. Oh, sorry, Mrs. Ritchie.
I just want to signal that I will be taking that wrestling mat figure of 9,300 and increasing it to 17,800. That would be for 2 mats.
17,800?
Yes. If the administration could just confirm that that would be the cost of the 2 mats to be replaced. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on, oh, Mr. Janine?
Rich, just any rhyme or reason as how you divvied up the $50,000 cut in the substitute teachers?
So we don't necessarily think we'll actually materialize it, but the bulk of your substitute money is in the high school, the middle school, and special education. So that's where the bulk of the cut would have to come from most of the areas.
So if it's okay, I would say that we're concerned about that cut reduction, just given the additional personal day, kind of where we are at the moment.
And that's actually probably a good thing to do. For the BOE cuts, does the administration have anything to add, teachers of the gifted?
Well, teachers up top, the one up top?
Well, let's just run
Yeah.
through BOE
Okay,
if there's
sure.
anything, because our next night is add cut. So let's run through if there's any information you'd like the board to have regarding any
Yes.
of these.
Well, that was a requested, if we actually moved it, and we don't see, we don't see the need to move that.
So you would recommend against it? Or it's not your recommendation to cut? We just handled substitutes, uniforms. I feel like you've said a lot on uniforms. Anything else to say?
If you get them, great. The only thing I would say about $89,000, whether it's uniforms or something else, some of this, the iPads and this type of stuff we would be advocating for. So the coaches, well, it would be good to have them, right? That's something we wanted, that provides opportunities for kids. And clearly the iPads is, oh, sorry, Dan.
No. Just finish your point.
I'm finished my point on that.
My point is, I don't think the audience has this sheet, so I think we need to be a little more clear on what we're talking about so they can try to follow along without having a sheet.
Pull it up.
Sorry about that.
So these are our ad cuts. They don't typically have this sheet because they're proposed.
But if they can, at least give
Sorry,
a little
yes.
more color to when we're
Yeah,
talking,
yeah.
because I think they're trying to follow along.
So we're running down the difference between any administrative recommendations for changes to the budget versus what you heard last week. Board of Education signals that they may adjust the budget.
So while you can't really see everything else, I mean, you'll get the gist when I talk about the money and the category.
There you go, that works.
And we got as far as the, oh, there you go.
No,
So
keep going down.
So,
With the coaches.
We were at, well, uniforms and coaches, Dr. Adley, you were weighing in together.
so yes, look, listen, I'd love the board to support everything. If it does, that's fine. It's not something firmly against somebody, it's just had force choices. I'm also laying people off. So I think you have to be at least conscious of that, right? We're making some tough choices of people's jobs. Yes, okay, trying to work with it, but over some of these things. So it's just worth bearing in mind. Coaches, again, if they get in, that'd be great. It'd be nice to service the kids. The iPads were definitely, we'll have the presentation next week. Admittedly, it's not the way we would like ultimately to do it, right, in terms of the plan for the thing, but one of the things, I was around the high school last week, just talking to groups of students, right, just about what they like about the school, so on and so forth, and just independent. It wasn't even touched upon for technology, right? It wasn't even like, well, what is it like for technology? Didn't even have that question. And independently, students told me if in the classes where the 9th grades are, the other classrooms up the other teachers in the other grades should be using the iPads. It doesn't make sense. So anyway, the bottom line is we would like to keep that in place and come back certainly with a presentation on a plan of implementation and so on. So it'd be important for us to keep that. The Logic crayons, I think that's in the 214 too, is that correct?
Correct.
Right, so the Logic crayons, if you were to buy the iPads, these are separate. These are separate crayons for, I think, we're going to be for the juniors, sophomores in the junior class. So there is iPads includes the Logic pens. Reduction in Chromebooks. Well, as long as we're getting the Chromebooks, if we reduce a section, that's will be understandable. This is recycling and receiving some funds for recycling the iPads. Elementary routers, that's just, I believe we can do without one. I believe that was the recommendation. OpenGov we've talked about. Legal fees, well, I think we know what legal fees was. It's based on the contract or the new fees that are coming down the line. That's a choice the board needs to make. We're not necessarily recommending that. And Project Lead the Way, it'd be great to have Project Lead the Way back in.
Any board questions or comments? Was there any other information board members feel that would be helpful for them as they deliberate before the February 11th meeting? Mrs. Ritchie.
Just for the stipends for the assistant coaches, with that, if that comes out, will there then be an impact on the participation levels? In other words, will students not be able to participate in those sports as a result of that?
Certainly we're pushing the envelope in some of the sections, if not having to reduce the amount of participants. I'm seeing some eyes here with my staff, so I must have said something. What's wrong?
So just to correct two things.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What did I say?
So the first one about the routers, it's not to do without one less router. So we did start to solicit more quotes for the routers. They are coming in less than what the budget is.
Oh, the
Part
Chinese tariff?
So part of it is the tariffs.
I missed the Chinese tariff.
So when we built the budget in October, November, there were tariffs on products built in China. As of right now, there are not. So assuming that stays in place, 5,000 is a safe production. And then the second one is the legal fees. So we are recommending for non-cert contracts to utilize Marge primarily. In place of Shipman and Goodwin, and just using Shipman and Goodwin on a consultant basis, which is typical of a lot of districts in the area. So based on what the district spent for non-cert contracts in the past, the hours that were accumulated by the individual at Shipman and Goodwin and whatever their new hourly rate, and assuming a portion of that occurs this year and a portion occurs next year, the recommendation is $13,000.
So we would only be using them for literally a consultancy service as opposed to sitting at the table.
And only for the non-certified contracts?
Correct.
Okay. Any other board questions?
So a comment?
Mrs. McCammon.
I put the iPads up, and there are a variety of reasons for putting the iPads up. One of them is that, I do want a clear understanding of whether or not kids are using them, and that we have the right controls in place for them to do so, and that teachers are staffed accordingly, and I think we're going to hear about that next week.
Yeah.
The other reason I put them up is because we are facing difficult choices, and I feel very strongly that we've been given a framework of putting student-facing and educational priorities ahead of some of the other things. And I think that, if we're going to talk about adding, we have to talk about cutting. And I personally feel strongly that I would prioritize iPads over some of the other things, but I think that if we're going to talk about choices, we do need to honor the fact that people are being laid off, and it's important. So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
The only thing I would say to that, I just would want to protect the academic side of the program. So this is where I know this is aggravating, but this is where I would say then uniforms would take a backseat for me in this case. But I respect your disposition on it.
Any other budget comments or questions? Everyone feel that they have information? Mrs. Ritchie?
Just on the iPads, for the 9th grade and the Chromebooks for the 5th grade, I asked this question in an email, but we have extras, we're basically extra every year. What happens to those? If a student doesn't take that, we just hold it for the 4 years in case something happens. I know that the students sign a contract regarding their devices, and there is insurance now for the devices that parents can opt in. So do we need 40 extra iPads, or don't we?
So for the Chromebooks, primarily at the middle school, we do see more damage on the Chromebooks. Usually they try to allot between 5 and 7% as spares, and what will happen is if something's damaged or needs to come offline for a day or even longer, they'll swap out the spare for the unit. At the middle school currently, all the spares are gone due to damage. The insurance is optional for the parents. There's not a huge amount of people who are buying the insurance. In terms of the iPads, it's about that 7%. About half of those are out for repairs, and then the other half are available for use should they be needed. So at the high school, I believe it was 97 iPad spares. But about half of those essentially are circled out when they're damaged and either have to be repaired in-house or sent to a repair facility.
So I guess given that the students are signing that contract, what does that contract mean? In other words, when there's damage, is there ever an instance where then the student becomes responsible or that family becomes responsible for the damage?
Depending on the level of damage, the parent would be billed for the cost of it.
Thank you.
Any other budget questions? Please know that if you have questions, send them in. We'll get them out the next meeting, but we want everyone to have all the information they need to feel informed on their budget vote. Okay? All right, we will move on to the next item, the appointment of the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instructions, K through 12, Dr. Adley.
Good evening, everybody. Again, thank you for staying so long. And I'm delighted to introduce for appointment through the board.
Oh, sure.
So at the back of the room is one of our new colleagues, Mr. Christopher Tramberg. And Mr. Tramberg actually have worked with Chris for 3 years in Granby, where he currently is the superintendent of schools. Chris has K to 12.
Chris, you can come on.
Come on up.
Stand in the back.
Christopher has K to 12 experience. His background is in music, and he served as a curriculum director, director of teaching and learning, and most recently for a couple of years as the assistant superintendent of schools. Chris has also experience at high-performing school districts. He was the principal of Avon High School. And he's gone on to be, obviously, the assistant superintendent in Granby. Believe me, there is not going to be a Granby bus pulling up. All right?
There's no buses.
Unlike, as I said, the there was a Westport bus that pulled up here at one point, wasn't there? I think. But anyway, but I'm delighted here to introduce to the staff Christopher. And Christopher's gone through interview processes. And he'll make a welcome addition. He's excited to be here. This is kind of where his roots is with his family down in New Jersey and also New York area. So he's sort of coming back to his roots a little bit. Things sometimes work out, and I had an opportunity to bring him to be part of the Central Services team here in Darien.
Okay. Well, certainly we wish Dr. De Silva well again in her new role as the superintendent of Ridgefield Schools, and she will be missed. But Mr. Tramberg has been an exciting addition to come forward for the Darien Board of Education to consider. So with that, I would entertain a motion to appoint Christopher Tramberg Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction for K-12. May I have such a motion? Mr. Burke, and a second. Mr. Deneen, all in favor? That is unanimous. Welcome to Darien. Feel free if you'd like a moment, or if we're putting you on the spot, tell us next time.
No, I'll just
You
say
might be better than the State of the Union.
I'll be more brief for sure.
Yeah.
But thank you to the board, thank you, Dr. Adley, and to the members of Cabinet who've been so welcoming already. To say I'm excited and honored is an understatement for sure. The past 24 hours have been interesting because it's, even with transition, there's stress and good stress and bad stress. And the past 24 hours have been pretty stressful. My day ended yesterday. I'm a member of the Library Board of Trustees in my town of Simsbury, where I live. And there was a presentation of a new painting, which is our sycamore tree, which is the largest tree in Connecticut. And when I saw the tree, I got really emotional, like I was just moved as I saw it. And the reason I got moved is because when my mom and sister visit me in Simsbury, they stop there first because they love the tree. And that minute, my mom called me, and my mother never calls me at night. So I immediately jumped up and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Nothing's wrong. I had a feeling you had a hard day today." Very strange. And I just wanted to let you know I'm so proud of you and I'm excited for this next chapter. So that kind of sealed the deal that if I didn't think all of this was right already, my mom certainly did that for me last night. So thank you. I'm excited. I knew this was a community of advocates and cheerleaders and confirmed this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome to the district.
If I may, I just want to thank Dr. Silva. Dr. Silva knows Christopher. She's been working very closely with him and it's going to do a nice transition for us. And Chris's first day, well, I think it's going to be about April 13th, so he'll be able to make that transition pretty quickly.
Thank you. With that, and after a long evening, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Stein and Mr. Sini, all in favor? That is, Mr. Brown, are you going to stay? Thank you.